I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. I am Ben Dietrich. Jordan Rodelli is on vacation, but Andrew Kuo does not take days off. Mr. Andrew Kuo, how is your non-off day treating you?
It's incredible. I'm just standing in the corner waiting for a long pass by the wagon himself, just draining threes. I feel incredible, man. Never been this way.
That is true original gangster OG behavior from you.
It's OG season, man. Those big time clutch buckets just rattle in for me every time.
You are an OG on these streets.
On these streets, unfortunately, but that's unfortunately yes, but fortunately not entirely true.
At some point, you get the O, just by virtue of being around long enough. Like you're an original.
That's what I mean. I'm an old dog. I can't claim that youthful energy anymore. Listen, not everyone is 16 forever like Jason Tatum.
Shout out to the teens.
Yeah, Tatum, other teenagers.
Jaleel Okafor. Teen for life. Dick Clark, America's oldest teen.
Kevin Knox will forever be 19 with unlimited potential.
So, I have been walking around the neighborhood recently.
I like
grabbing
the sound
some
of this.
morning coffees. And I've been noticing this really long line. It's a few blocks away. And it's there almost every day. And being in the COVID era, I kind of assumed early on it was maybe a testing center or something. That's the only thing that people line up for.
Fair.
But it's not. So I walked by it one day.
Is it for wet ass pizza?
It's near Paulie G's. The not the slice one, but the sit down restaurant.
The brick oven one?
It's right near there, yeah. Mm-hmm. And I asked someone in the line, like, what's going on here? He's like, yeah, I'm waiting for a pie. It's a pop-up pie place. And I was like, that's so lame.
No.
Like, that's incredibly lame. You guys are waiting at 9 a.m. in a 50-person line for a pie? So I don't know anything about the place, but I've just been kind of telling people, oh, yeah, it's a pop-up pie place. Yeah, it's pop-up pies. These idiots are every morning looking for pies. And I would walk by, and after a while, started getting really envious. Like, oh, these people are going to have pies soon. Look at them there. So smug in the knowledge that they will have pie in hand.
Show me anyone who's sad around a fresh pie.
That's true. So my mockery turned to envy, but my pride would not let me get in a pie line. Then I asked someone else about it. I'm like, oh no, it's a bakery and it might be permanent. I'm like, look, I have like no information on this. It's one sentence from one dude who is standing in a line, but I've been operating as if this is a pop-up pie place.
You need those pie facts, Jack.
I did not have. I was a low pie information voter.
Not surprisingly, I have a fond feeling towards lines and the idea of lines, and when I see lines, because I love people who are psyched on things, and this is going way back to like, I used to line up at night after midnight for albums, for CDs. So when like a new Jay-Z record dropped, we would wait in line on Broadway at the Tower Records to get the new Jay record, or even Blink 182. I remember that night, Portishead, the second album. I waited in line for that, and then sometimes it'd be like, it's sold out, we're sorry, you have to come back tomorrow afternoon. And every time there's a line, I get grouchy, because that means if it's something I want, I'm gonna have to wait too. But you have to remember that you are the line. Like, it's like, oh, I can't believe this traffic. You're the traffic, just exist as traffic. But it's always for something cool, and I like people who are psyched on things, and whether it's waiting online for sneakers on the sneakers app, or for wet ass pies in Dietrichville, That's nice, man. People are psyched on pies. That's cool.
Yeah, my scorn has turned to sheer jealousy. I remember those nights though when albums would come out. Was it like before every Tuesday or whatever?
Yeah.
And there was that one date in like '97, like old school. I think it was '97, like back in the day.
Yeah.
Old head, real OG behavior. Was it Black Star? And
Yeah, there was multiple.
Who else came out? Was it Tribe, Black Star, and like
The Love Movement? Are you talking about which Tribe record are you talking about? I mean, I could Google the year, I guess.
I mean, I did not do any research on this, so I'm just sort of trying to remember exactly when I went to the record store. But there was like 3 or 4 albums. It was like, and De La, and Jay-Z, and something.
Yeah.
But there was like 3 or 4 albums that came out on the exact same date. And I remember being in the record store to buy all of them at the same time.
Yeah, you'd easily drop like $60 sometimes. And the marketing was interesting because sometimes there wasn't 2 disaster movies released in the same week or month because one of them was too powerful. But if you're like into Black Star, maybe you release your De La record alongside of Black Star because you get the same fans with money willing to spend on these $15 to $18 CDs. I remember Wu-Tang Forever was a thing. Like, we were ready. I think I took a nap. We were ready to wait in line for this record, and we're not disappointed.
I was getting promo vinyl back then.
Yeah.
So, okay, so it was September 29th, 1998.
I love this.
And it was Jay-Z, Outkast, Black Star, A Tribe Called Quest, and Brand Nubian putting out LPs on the same date.
Without even
Heavy hitters.
without even jogging my memory, I think I'm going out on a limb, but I bet that Outkast record was a classic. I bet the J record was definitely a classic, and everything else was a solid effort.
I just am seeing this on The Ringer, and
At the BMX.
they're saying it was the greatest rap release album day ever. I don't think it's even in question.
I mean, I would have to do research, but that's pretty phenomenal. Can you tell me which J and which Outkast records those were?
I've already closed the window, sorry.
Well, case closed. Done and done.
It was still one of the good Outkast albums and one of the good Jay-Z albums.
Well, there was no bad Outkast record, and Jay had a run of 10 years where he was perfect. So those were the 90s into the aughts, so we're good.
I would guess that it was...
What's
Sorry,
going on?
I'm
Are you
sorry.
scarfing pies?
So I just had a huge bite of blueberry pie.
Oh, yeah, okay. Back to pies. What would be your go-to pie if they had the whole pie spectrum?
Well, here's the thing, Andrew Quo. I love pies. Pies are great. That's what makes my judgmental attack on the local pie line so mystifying. That I'm into pies. I like a good peach pie. I like a pecan pie. I like an apple pie. Pumpkin.
Yes.
I'm not
Yeah.
even. I don't even have a hierarchy. I just like pies.
Look at you,
Yeah.
the pie lover. I live next to a pie shop down in downtown New York, and it's awesome. It's open late, so people go after they eat dinner. Back in the day when they were eating out, but still during COVID, they've been slinging pies, and now they're making ice cream that you can put on the pies. Also, we cannot talk about New York City pies without shouting out Cookie's friends, Cookie's classic chefs, Pies and Thighs, who make some of New York City's best pies.
Absolutely. Great call. Great pies. Mm-hmm. I feel like buying a whole pie is kind of insane, but I respect it.
I do it on the holidays. I love some pumpkin pie, man. I think that is truly delicious stuff. You can get through a whole pie pretty quickly, shockingly, but I agree.
Well, that's my fear.
Yeah.
Like, you buy a whole pie, it means you're going to eat a whole pie.
Yeah.
Like a slice, 2 slices, yeah, you can. That's fine. But
Mm-hmm.
just chewing your way through a whole pie is going to happen, and it's going to be delicious, and you will be attacked by such pangs of remorse.
I know. Do you do a la mode?
Love a la mode.
Yeah, it's incredible. It
Incredible,
microwave
you
the
just
pie.
can't
Yeah.
have that around the house just to have.
It's dangerous. It's dangerous.
Yeah.
What other dangerous foods are there?
I mean,
Buying a pizza is dangerous.
anything in bulk, like when you can buy several sleeves of cookies, you know what's going to happen.
I had one, Ben. One sleeve.
Single sleeve.
I just had one. I know. I do this thing where I go to the supermarket and buy all this stuff and immediately eat everything so I don't have the temptation to eat it later. So I'm like, I need to eat all these cookies so I'm not thinking about it tomorrow.
Shout out to Cookies, the basketball podcast that is now morphed into like a single panel strip of Kathy. Ack! I ate the whole pie.
Yeah, that office life is. Would Kathy be remote stressing now? Acting from her home? That was a work cartoon like Dilbert, right? Am I mistaken?
No. Kathy was.
That was just her whole life.
Yeah, it was her life.
Yeah.
Ack.
I love Kathy's. My friend had a secret bar beneath her gallery for a few years, and it was called Gothy's. It was based on Kathy's, but goth, and that theme was very loose. But when she decided to open it, she would call it Gothy's is open, and we would text on our cell phones and all go.
Gothy's is open. That sounds like a slogan for a certain New York City basketball franchise.
Yeah, same energy, right? She's like, I only have 8 beers, 8 seats, and
3
only
Randalls,
yeah,
7 power forwards, a Taj.
a Taj, maybe a Morai. She did have a dog, so there you go. But it was a small Pomeranian, not Pomeranian, a Yorkie,
Get your story straight, man.
New Yorkie.
Look, the Cookies listeners, especially our beloved Patreons, deserve the facts from you.
Oh yeah,
Just get it right. They deserve it.
no goth cartoon bar misinformation here.
Yeah, come on, be better. Do better. Oh man, I got a little pie throat here. Water really does the trick. In less exciting news, in more horrifying and sadly predictable
Oh,
news,
I love this. I love this transition to horrifying. This is always something I'm looking forward to.
I mean, look, I'm from Rochester, New York, as most listeners probably know. And in the last week, a video or several, I believe over 80 minutes or so of camera footage from the police surfaced from March. And in it, it shows the police restraining a naked man, Daniel Prude, and putting a spit bag over his head, and then proceeding to put pressure on his head and neck until he stops moving. And several days later, he died as a result of the injuries that he suffered during that encounter. It's harrowing footage, and not for the faint of heart. It reminds me a lot of the George Floyd footage, the sort of casual killing of a man by police officers, specifically a black man. And being from Rochester and knowing things about that city and about the Rochester Police Department, it was not shocking at all. And, and now we're seeing a lot of protests in Rochester. There's been protests in New York City in Times Square that are tied to this case. But I don't know, just thinking of growing up in Rochester and the police force, it's one of the highest percentages in America of cops who do not live within the community or the city boundaries that they work within. And that seems to be a really bad trend. And it was the same in Minnesota as well. You get huge amounts of police who do not live and interact with the communities that they are supposed to be protecting. And you end up with a real disconnect. And seeing that in Rochester, and again, I worked for the public defender there for a summer. I was working in the jails. Like, I've seen all this stuff very, very up close. And yeah, I mean, it's not the way you want to see your hometown get into a national conversation, but
No.
It's also not surprising.
And Rochester's been in the news a lot, but first this problem, it's like that footage was something that was incredibly hard to watch. And I think, personally, I think it's important to see it just to see the plain kind of these actions in their purest form, without any noise, just seeing it. And the optics were truly horrifying, and I'm not even saying that with any sort of hyperbole. Just awful stuff, man. And these police officers got into a situation that they were ill-equipped to handle, and there was no one there who knew what they were doing. And this man was clearly in need, and they had no clue. And I just want, in general in life, I want everyone to have more of a clue, myself included. I should know what I'm talking about more. But cops, everybody, it's situations like this that are deeply, deeply disturbing and frustrating because they were taking an L right from the jump.
It struck me immediately as the kind of situation in which police do not need to be involved. That's my immediate takeaway. This guy's brother noticed that his brother was acting erratically. I believe it turned out that he was on dust. Do not need the cops involved. Do not need men with guns, men who use force, men who inflict violence to enter the fray. Just not their role, not their job.
Don't ask a carpenter to make you a pizza or a pie.
Yeah, and cops are a hammer. That's all they know how to do. And you can't have them involved with citizens in situations where it can escalate. They were called to help, and they murdered a man.
Yeah.
That doesn't work. To me, that's like screaming and yelling, please defund us. Take these responsibilities away from our office. Look at what we do. This is not our job. We can't be asked to be in schools. We can't be asked to deal with young people. We can't be asked to deal with the mentally ill because we are this bad at it.
And I think mental illness is the thing that it will be a challenge moving forward, because sometimes it's not so much about homeless policy. It's we put money into ways to take care of people in need. It's well, do you understand these individual stories that these people have and how to treat them? Because they're going to see your thing and be like, we don't want that. I'm good, And treating what goes on in someone's mind is such a tricky thing that it's imperative that we start understanding this better. And obviously the cops are not equipped for this, and they're not trained for this, and civilians like us are not trained for this either. And I don't know what the answer to this would be. In my mind, if there was a utopia, it would be someone you call, an agency that would come right away to talk to somebody who was psychologically in need. I don't know if that can exist on Earth, but I think it can.
I agree. I think it's about scope. Mm-hmm. You don't call the cops to get your garbage taken away. That's a different group. Yep. That's the Department of Sanitation.
Right.
Cops don't teach in schools. Okay, so get the cops out of schools and get people who work within the school system in schools. Mm-hmm. To me, that's the spirit of defunding the police, is limiting their tasks, and therefore you can then limit the scope of their budget and say, no, we're going to minimize what you do and how you interact with the public, and accordingly you'll be funded less specifically for the jobs that you actually do. But sorry, go ahead.
Hey, and I don't want to, I think that's a valid point, and I don't want to get into it too much, but training cops to do more, I want a separate thing that doesn't involve people with guns. Yeah. But if society chooses to have one 911 line towards one agency, one arm of society, if you wanted to give half the cops 1,000 hours of mental illness training, I'm for that. Anything like that seems reasonable to me. If you said we have a separate whole thing, they don't have guns, they don't have the right to arrest you, but they're trained in mental illness, like what ambulance, what if you call the
that's what I'm
hospital?
saying. These things exist. It's not like the cops come and pick you up and take you to the hospital. It's not like the cops come if there's a gas leak.
And it brings a problematic thing, just like in terms of a mechanism, because let's say you have a loved one in need and they need immediate someone to immediately come and deal with the situation. You would have to know that you had options at that point. Like, do you call an ambulance? Do you call the fire department? Or do you call the cops? And some people...
But if you have a fire, you just call 911, and they are like, okay, cool, the fire department's on the way. Or if someone's hurt, they'll call an ambulance. And like a cop might come, because when you call 911, a lot of times everyone just responds to it. But we're already doing this. We're already designated, like, fire. Someone's hurt. Someone's, being chased by someone with a knife. Like, we already do that. It's a matter of, like, a switchboard operator saying, oh, that sounds like a mental health thing. Okay,
yeah.
Let's get those guys there instead of the dudes who, arrest people for shoplifting.
And this is exactly my point, right? A small fraction of this is a mechanical issue. The mechanism didn't trigger the right way. You shouldn't have people show up with guns because they're going to want to do something with force. They're not here to protect you. They're here to enforce a rule with strength. And I think this would exactly the mechanism didn't trigger the right in the right direction at the switchboard. Maybe
because we don't have that mechanism right now. That's kind of the thing, right? It's like our mechanisms are okay. There's a guy acting erratically. Send the police.
Yeah,
like that's the only mechanism at the disposal of calling 911. But the other thing that I just wanted to get into briefly was that Rochester has a black mayor. Rochester has a black DA. The population of the city is like 37% non-Hispanic white, using the terms from the census. Mm-hmm. And you still have these issues. And if you look at New York City, you have a mayor who ran from the left. You have progressive city council members. You have a progressive population in a deeply blue city who has nonetheless elected Giuliani and Mayor Bloomberg. But same situation. There is a very, what's the word I'm looking for here? There is a serious, I'm going to use disconnect again, but there's a serious disconnect between the population of cities and the police behavior and the emphasis on the police force that they get. Just to, I don't know if that was incredibly coherent, but I'm saying it doesn't make sense that the NYPD is the NYPD in New York City. It doesn't make sense that the Rochester Police Department is behaving like this in a city that should be more aware of how this is happening. I don't know what's going on here.
I mean, following the money is something. It's like one of the oldest stories, right? Because it's a tradition to complain about the subway system in New York, and you quickly find out all the decisions are being made by people who don't take the subway, and a lot of them are in Albany. And when politicians run for office, let's say Cynthia Nixon was running for mayor, she was like, I'm going to take the subways, and I know you guys, your lives are affected by the efficiency of these things. I'm running on the platform of I'm going to make this experience better. And I was like, that's so huge. A politician that is like addressing our needs. That sounds so weird, right? It's not some hot worldview. It's not like, us New Yorkers need to stand tall, and I am your leader. She's like, no more delays in the subways. And she didn't win, but it was an interesting way to think about money and where these decisions are being made, and where police officers are being paid, and where they live, and where they decide to send their kids to school, and where they work. This is all about like the regionalization, or like the compartmentalization of places where we live and work.
I think police unions clearly have a lot of power, and there is a fear from someone like Mayor de Blasio, who's a weak man, and he fears the NYPD.
Do you say he's weak just because he eats pizza with a knife and fork?
Very weak because of that. But, he's a weak man, and
Not a fan.
he ran for office on stop and frisk. He has a black son, a black wife. And when push came to shove, he sided with the cops against the protesters. And you're like, this is weird. This doesn't make sense. And when the city council, we're going to take $1 billion away from the NYPD, and they faked it. They just shifted $1 billion somewhere else and gave it back to the cops again. With all that pressure, people camping out by City Hall, couldn't do it. They couldn't do it. And these are all Democrats. This is deeper than rap. Now, there's something here that's this is straight extortion. These are people who are terrified, scared, pissless of the cops in the cities that they supposedly run. They are terrified, petrified of pissing off the cops, and they'll do anything that the cops want.
Well, the union has power. Especially in the mayoral office, the union has influence, and I think it's going to take a culture change. And my hope, the optimist in me, says it feels like this culture change has begun. Especially with Gen X is so tranquil. We didn't really kind of get in the game, but millennials are kind of throwing down a little bit, and I'm encouraged by them. And the old way of doing things, of unions kind of with their influence, of treating the divide between lawmakers, law enforcers, and our communities have to be addressed. And I think I have a choice, and that choice is to think that these things finally, through technology, through seeing these videos, immediately zap to our phones, into our brains, onto Twitter, our thoughts, everything is expediting what we need to do.
Well, you have the National Democratic Party and people talking about police reform and, defund the police. It's fairly conventionally understood that has to happen. And then you go and look at these places like Rochester with a black mayor and a black DA, and they're incredibly resistant to those ideas. Very, very odd how on a local level, politicians are not necessarily echoing the sort of, broader sentiment that's around law enforcement on a national level. Even if someone like Joe Biden is obviously very middle of the road and not taking a defund the police stance. But many people are. But it's not happening where it needs to. And the thing about Rochester also, it's a city of I don't know at this point what the population is, under a couple 100,000. And one of the poorest cities in America, which most people probably would not guess. That in Buffalo. Incredibly, incredibly poor cities with so many...
I think we understand that. I think in 2020 we finally understand that.
Which is also... doesn't make sense to me. How could you have, an economic juggernaut like New York City in the same state and have these places that are just struggling so badly? But one of the big parts was you had Kodak. That was the lifeblood of Rochester, or at least one of the main industries for a long time. And I remember, as they laid off the parents of kids that I knew, it's like a steady drumbeat, just year and year and year and year. Kids, parents getting laid off. And they're a great example of sort of technology supplanting an industry, because they went from being this proud manufacturer of film and one of the sort of greatest American brands to kind of just licensing out their logo to slap on stuff like Kodak phones now. And then eventually now they're kind of just a stock scam where they were given a bunch of money to make chemicals for a COVID vaccine that doesn't work. and there's all sorts of allegations of insider trading. Like, this is very emblematic of like the crumbling of the American dream.
And it's a bunch of old white guys trying to do something in their interests and it falling apart and backing away, and it affects these communities. And when you say when you talk about places like Rochester, and I think of when I was a teenager I went to Mechanicsburg, and it was kind of wild to see. Shout out to Mechanicsburg, great town, but America has towns that have had big industry before, and when that industry leaves, there is no support system to prop up that community as much. And I immediately think of policy and how policy dictates culture, and this is our whole nature versus nurture thing. But I think my parents always used to tell me they flew around the world to live in America, where they were not from, and then they traveled across the country for a job. And my parents are like, we would do anything for an opportunity for a life. And I think in our generation, or the generations after that, the dream is to buy a home and then to take a loan out from a bank. But then you're stuck somewhere, and then you can't really get out from under that as easily. And then when your work goes away, the first instinct would be, and this was an issue in the 2016 election, how come the businesses don't come back and support the community? It's like, oh, right, people aren't migrating anymore. People have their stakes in these home loans, and we saw the market crash because of them. And they have built families in these communities like Rochester, and when Kodak goes away, it's a seismic change with fewer options than before.
I would say that Rochester has had a bit of rejuvenation over the last, decade.
Shout out to Rochester.
It was slower coming back, but you're having now sort of the predictable, here's a little local brewery that's in a former abandoned warehouse downtown, and
Williamsburg, I love it.
We're going to build some lofts. It's very much like the sort of Brooklyn-y culture that slowly, 10 years later kind of crept in there. But there is something interesting, and it makes me feel a certain way about Rochester and Buffalo, where everyone's moving upstate. It's like this idea of, bucolic Catskills lodges with A-frames and having your own garden. I'm like, yeah, that's not all of upstate.
It's like when our president talks about suburban people. It's like, is he talking about Westchester? Because that's not really what the suburbs are. That's the wealthy suburbs adjacent to New York City. When I think of suburbs, I think more of Rochester. I
mean, Rochester is a small city in the same way of a mini-sized Cleveland. That's probably the best kind of example. It's not a mini New York. It's a mini Detroit. It's a mini Cleveland. It's similar to Columbus. They're all those kind of mid-sized American cities that are fairly walkable downtown and, in residential neighborhoods, but are surrounded by suburbs that now have more people and a much higher population than the city itself.
I'd like to go to Rochester, man. I mean, shout out to any city has a signature food item. And I would like to travel around America to try all these food items. And garbage plates are just a wonderful thing, man.
There are a couple of basketball players from Rochester.
Who?
You got the God, John Wallace.
He is the God, man. I love him. Ex-Knick legend.
Thomas Bryant of the Wizards.
Wow. A huge pillar of that rebuild. I love it.
Rochester legend. Who else? Oh, there's, I don't follow college ball, but I think there's two guys who might go in the next first round or at least be drafted. One very high, who are both from Rochester. So, on the come up. Shout out to Rochester.
And shout out to sports a little bit. No sin bin, but the Buffalo Bills, man. That is the identity of an entire half of New York, which is very different than the bottom half of New York. And when you take a team away, I think they took the Sabres away. something went away there recently. I may be misspeaking, but it's like, when Kodak doesn't do the technological innovations that are happening around it, it affects the entire region. And there's no reason Kodak shouldn't have cornered a digital market. But that takes talent to see that. Blockbuster had the option to do streaming, but it seemed risky, and they decided not to do it. And Netflix did. It's not as simple as that, I know. But, maybe it is as simple as that. It's like, was someone in the room being like, yo, guys, we should look at shooting analytics? It's like, no, we want people who want to win. I'm like, that's good too. So let's do whatever you want to do, boss.
And let's not forget 1951 NBA champions, the Rochester Royals, who beat the Knicks.
They were in the NBA, not the ABA?
NBA.
Wow. Where did the Royals go to? What are they now?
The Sacramento Kings. That's why you can find jerseys that Boogie Cousins wore that say Rochester on them. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, they became, I want to say like the Cincinnati or Kansas City Kings, and then made their way to Sacramento. That's about all the Rochester content I have for today. Next week we'll be back, and we're going to focus on Utica. We're going to Schenectady, really work our way around the entire dirt belt of upstate New York.
Maybe by then Kodak will have their own team. The Kodak.
Man, Kodak doesn't even exist. They're an idea at this point.
Right.
But the Kodak thing is interesting though, because thinking of how photography is more popular than it's ever been. Every single person is walking around with a camera on them. Mm-hmm. I've been noticing over the last month or so, a lot of people now starting to use like the close friends stories on Instagram that were not using them in the past.
Tell us what the close friends thing is.
So on Instagram stories, there are a lot of people have private accounts anyway, but
true.
There's sort of your public facing, like for general audiences, Instagram stories, which anyone who follows you can see, but there's also close friends, which are limited to sort of a hand-picked collection, I guess, big or small, of people that you want to allow to see those stories. And it has a little green ring around it when it's like a private story or a close friend story, excuse me. So over the last, month or so, definitely seeing people's public-facing stories with everyone in a mask, like social distancing, and then private stories are like people hanging out at like a house party, people like at a inside of a bar. And I'm not specifically talking about only in New York City. This is like internationally, but there's definitely like a weird. Something's happening for sure, where people are hiding like what they're actually doing because of like COVID shamers.
Yeah, I always wonder about Twitter too. More Twitter. It's like what we talk about on there, and then another more private one be like, what do you really think about this? Like what are the conversations you have when you're cooking a pappardelle meal, a ravioli, slapping that ravioli on your DiGiorno pizza. When you're doing that, like, what are you really talking about? Twitter 2, that's what it's for. The realness that isn't on Twitter 1. It could be the same. I don't know.
But is this leading towards something?
What do you mean?
Like, are we going to see a change maybe in people's behavior, or is this just COVID specific?
I mean, the way I'm just throwing ideas out there. The way we use the internet and the way we treat these platforms is so fluid, right? And that's the fear of a company that is successful at it, because we don't have brand loyalty. TikTok is nothing. We migrate to the next thing. And I think that's what something like Instagram is banking on. Will they come to us? Like, how come Xerox didn't corner the market on digital document signing? Somehow they didn't, and DocuSign did, and these things don't necessarily make sense, the Blockbuster being the best example. Will our behavior change? It's like, I think definitely, right?
I mean, there's a few different points you made there. And I do agree that I think people only have a certain bandwidth, no pun intended, for using a variety of apps, like a lot. We might all have 50 on our phone and you look at the weather, but you're not looking at the weather all day.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where you have like, well, that's why Instagram keeps evolving, because I think there's an understanding that you can't just be a photo sharing app and have people on it all day. So you have to start evolving and integrate Snapchat. You have to integrate TikTok. You have to just keep making your product more encompassing, because you can't just have people decide to use one or the other.
Yeah.
Or excuse me, people will only use one or the other primarily. And that's why I think Twitter has succeeded, because they haven't really had a rival. No one's really trying to do what Twitter has. And if they are, whether it's like Discord or an alternative, like everyone's on Twitter.
Facebook tried, but it wasn't the same experience.
Right, it was the updates, but it also just felt integrated into
something else.
What else they were doing. Like Twitter works because it's so limited, I think.
Yeah, I really like Twitter. I see these platforms as skins, though. I almost see as soon as you peel away that first layer of what we do on these platforms and what their brands are, you get into like something bigger, and that's when we start talking about the integration of technology into our lives. Netflix, the success of Netflix, Twitter, and Instagram is almost based on like who controls like the idea of like the cloud or storage. And Silicon Valley, shout out to that amazing show, which is hilarious, but kind of a heavy idea in terms of where technology is going. That show is all about a bunch of guys who figured out a better compression system and a way to store information. And that sounds like, who cares? I'm into Instagram. I'm like, Instagram doesn't matter. Like TikTok is not important. The algorithm is important. So they're arguing about the algorithm. The TikTok itself getting sold in America is valuable for sure, in billions of dollars. But what we really want to talk about is how TikTok stays in our brains. To your point, how
Netflix is a good example though, because they actually, and by they I mean entertainment companies, have sort of created this entire labyrinth of different places that you have to subscribe to if you want to get everything. And it's a little bit different from the idea of, well, you have time for Twitter, you have time for Instagram. That's kind of it. And if you shift to a different platform, you're going to give up one of those, and it's almost binary to a degree. Mm-hmm. But Netflix is like, all right, you sign up for Netflix, you sign up for Amazon, you sign up for Disney, you sign up for HBO, and you're just rebuilding your cable package via, I guess, like a la carte digital subscriptions. And ultimately, at the end of it, you're just paying for cable again.
Yeah, I mean, as with so many things, everything just kind of washes out. I am annoyed that I cut my cable because it ended up being the same cost, but I do like the way that these companies compete against each other for my attention, because the products can get better and better.
Is there a solution to this problem I'm going to present? You want to watch a movie. You don't know where it's streaming. So you have to go through and start searching in Amazon, in Netflix, on Hulu, and you're looking for this movie. Oh, can't find it. I guess it's not on any. Like, how do you get around that? It's really cumbersome to try to find a movie on various streaming networks.
This sounds so dumb.
Like you Google it and it'll be wrong because the information isn't updated.
There's a website that does it. For example, I wanted to watch Casino Royale last night, and I Googled it, and it was on Amazon. So there's the sites that do it. So I just had my phone. I'm like, where can I watch Casino Royale? It's like Amazon has it on this date.
Right. No, I know you can Google it, and I've done that, but a lot of times it'll be incorrect. Sometimes is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
it'll be like, oh, it's streaming on here, and you go there and like, no, it's not streaming there.
So the answer is someone just has to update that, or they have to have incentive. So I don't think it's worth a standalone app, but I bet you someone will buy it and just have it integrated into your smart TV, whatever. I don't know. To me, it's It's something that's collateral damage.
What made you watch Casino Royale?
I love gambling movies. This is weird. I love like card table movies, all of them. Like Molly, I really liked. That's the name of it, right? The one about the L.A. poker players.
You should check out Rounders.
Before I check out Rounders, is there a podcast that would go through and compare characters of Rounders to Boston Celtics?
Are you talking about re-roundables?
The Re-roundables? I also enjoy that movie.
I love that Rounders isn't even set in Boston, but for some reason it's the Re-roundables.
The Re-rounders. I think. Is there an actor from Boston? I mean, Edward Norton is an honorary BMM member, right? I don't know where he's from, but I think Boston people love Edward Norton.
Yeah, they really identified with him in American History X.
What's that movie about? Is it about gambling?
No.
Not at all. At all. But yeah, I love the genre of card movies, and I also love 007, and I was going through all of them, so I hadn't seen that one. I love the Daniel Craig era, so I hadn't watched that in a few years, so I wanting to scratch that itch.
Your boy Robert Pattinson came down with COVID, and they had to stop shooting. What did you think of the trailer for The Batman? Personally, I'm kind of sick of gritty reboots. Now I want something dumb.
Well, I have a thing where I think if you reboot a movie, it has to be in a different genre. So it should be a musical or a comedy, or an animation. If you wanted to reboot Apocalypse Now, it would have to be a comedy. But to that point, I mean,
they did that, kind of.
Oh, the Robert Downey Jr. one?
Yeah.
But it's not the brand of Apocalypse Now, right?
No, I agree. Right, because otherwise you're just trying to redo a classic. And that's why I generally am not a huge fan of American remakes of like dramas and incredible movies that were made overseas. It's like, I thought The Departed was good.
That's pretty good.
It's good. I like the actors in it. But, the Korean original is like better.
Yeah, but it's different. Like, no one's watching that Korean original in America, right?
I understand a million times why they do it. It's a great story. It's a huge hit movie, Infernal Affairs, in Korea. But you're right, it's not going to be a smash here. Maybe that has changed a little bit, though, with Parasite's success.
Well, I was going to mention Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I thought David Fincher's version was far superior. Christopher Nolan's darker take on the Tim Burton Batman, like, those three movies are my favorite movies ever. I got to be honest, And the Pattinson trailer, it's like, oh yeah, just put another layer of dark filter on this. But I'm
like, hard to see.
I know, and the trailer doesn't tell us much, as we know, because they're still filming it, right? But it seems like the same, and it seems like it's growlier and darker. But Pattinson is an awesome actor, so I'm just willing to deal with it because I want to see his take on the affliction of Batman. The Batman affliction.
I think a Batman movie that's told in part from the perspective of like the citizens of Gotham would be kind of interesting. Mm-hmm. I forget who wrote it, but it was cool idea about how Batman's superpower as time goes on is just that he doesn't have to operate by the rules that the police do. And now that cops have tanks, cops have, more or less X-ray vision. Cops have all these gadgets. They can knock people down with sound. They can steal all your cell phone intercepts and harvest the information from your messages and read them. They, with a stinger. They have all these abilities, and the only thing that Batman kind of has now is that he doesn't have to operate by rules.
Well,
so Batman is like the truest, most brutalist fascist.
In Justice League, there was that joke. All these people who could fly and make fire, Or like, what's your superpower? And Ben Affleck's like, I'm rich, which is kind of funny. Yeah,
This was specifically talking about how the technology advantage that always sort of made Batman different from law enforcement and gave him an edge is kind of vanished.
Yeah, I mean, I think about this idea in hero movies a lot. I love all superhero movies. But let's say you had like a worldview, like an Avengers idea. Everyone has a different talent. Everyone does their different thing. And then there's always one that can like smush everybody, like Neo, or like control people's mind, or just like implode time. And they're end up doing karate and like chopping people and like blocking punches. I'm like, can't you just like crush time and space? Why do you have to do kung fu? And I know it's movies and you want to see that one-on-one conflict, but that always got me about it. Like, does Bruce Wayne need to put on an outfit? Can't he just be Batman behind a computer?
I just want Batman to be terrifying and the citizens to hate him. That he comes down and like kills people for like shoplifting, and you're like, get this guy out of here. Like, how do we prevent this weird venge-filled psycho from coming down and putting people's heads through windshields for jaywalking?
And this is the narrative, right? The fake Batman idea that was in the comic books. Like, if he's a vigilante, everyone else turns into a vigilante, which is like a Twitter allegory, you know? And then they are the villains. Being like, can you guys like stop doing stuff? It's like, well, we're maintaining peace. It's like, let me chill.
Yes. So moving along to other things that have happened in Gotham of late. Your man, Steve Nash, a top
Mr. Nash, if you're nasty.
top 50 player of all time, has been hired as the coach of the Brooklyn Nets. There are a few different conversational points to unpack.
Yeah, which one do you want to go?
Just jumping right into it, do you think this is a good hire?
Yeah, I think it's fine. To quickly, again, I think all coaches are more or less interchangeable unless you get the great ones, which are 5 or 6 of them: D'Antoni, Nick Nurse, Greg Popovich, Steve Kerr at this point. Unless you can get one of those guys, sure. And this is a smart hedge by Sean Marks in this conversation specifically, in that just as a hire or just as a basketball guy, as a GM, if he hires an unproven coach and the coach succeeds, he gets all the accolades. If the coach fails, then he didn't want it enough. So he kind of protects himself with this. Hiring a known coach brings a lot of baggage, and it's just like not a smart play by a GM.
To me, Nash is a fairly safe candidate, if only because of his history. That he was a point guard who played under Don Nelson, who was a progressive offensive mind. Same deal with Mike D'Antoni, who helped transfer him to stardom. So he clearly understands the value of forward-thinking offensive systems. He has benefit from it personally. He's seen teams succeed because of it. He's surrounded himself for most of his career with these guys who are thoughtful and, I guess, inventive, let's say.
And he himself is thoughtful.
Yeah, he's a smart dude. And, then he spent time around Golden State, around, I guess, from player development side in some regards, around the players. He understands stardom. He's lived in New York City. I think he's a safe bet to be at least pretty good at coaching due to his backstory. And it does seem as if this was partially Kevin Durant saying, like, yeah, I really like this guy. And him being someone that players respect and can identify with. And I don't know if that was the case with Kenny Atkinson before, but I do think there's a personality management issue that they are thinking that Nash can do a better job at.
I agree. I think Nash is well-liked in the league. I think he's well-liked by everybody. It is a safe hire. The other conversation is, why wasn't it Jacques Vaughn? I mean, I think if it was announced that Jacques Vaughn could stay on, I'd be like, that makes sense. They seem to like him. He seems to be doing well. He comes from a coaching family tree, I believe, a Popovich coaching family tree that has had success. He is a legitimate candidate for head coach, and I was good with that. So there was kind of some questions in terms of representation in the NBA at the coaching ranks that always should be talked about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And even I don't think we have to say Nash is a bad hire or Nash should not have been hired, but we can also acknowledge that there is something distasteful and problematic about a league that has something like, I don't know, 9 former players as coaches and only 2 of them are black. Those numbers are not exactly correct, but it's along those lines. And to say that, in a league that is 75% black, only 5-7 coaches are. Like these numbers don't match up correctly.
Yeah.
And that is the case whether or not Nash is a good coach. Whether or not Nash is an inspired hire or a shitty hire, those numbers exist independently.
Yeah, and there, Twitter was quick to respond to that. There are black ex-players who got jobs right away without coaching experience. Many recently. But I think, this is a moving target that I hope we can satisfy as many people as possible. I would have rode with Jacques Vaughn. I quite liked him in interviews, and I liked the Nets and the direction they were going. This is all up to KD, right? Like Joseph Tsai and Sean Marks have KD and Kyrie in the room being like, what should we do with coach, guys? You guys are the coaches, but who should we have on the sidelines?
I agree. That does seem to be how this decision was made. There's no way that they replaced Jacques Vaughn with Nash and didn't consult those guys.
Yeah.
It's just no chance.
Those guys are at the point in their careers where they could be coach, and they're on the court, and those are 2 basketball geniuses. So I do think this hire has a lot to do with them.
It's funny because, you see former players, and I understand their desire to be represented in the coaching ranks and in front offices and executive positions because, as a pro-labor person, this makes sense that you want there to be a channel from the blue-collar workers to make their way to become white-collar workers within any company. It shouldn't just be the execs up here and the proles down here. And I think that idea is valid, that coaching and front offices and all those kind of executive positions should have players in it. At the same time, I feel like it kind of comes back more to representation because, Daryl Morey isn't allowed to play in the NBA just because he's a good GM.
I agree with all this. Yeah.
I'm like, I get it. I think the racial dynamics of the NBA in terms of coaching and management are fucked. I also think that maybe it's not the players who should be shifted into those positions. Maybe it's more about an overall recruitment, an overall sort of cultivation of talent and looking outside of the box. And because that's a pretty small pool of people to choose from if you're going to say, we're going to find black executives, but we're going to only look within guys who used to be in the league. That's a different skill set, and that's only a tiny group of people. So I think it's more about a top-down. How do you make sure that these organizations are reflective of the people who make it money and the people who make it great, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the same people exactly.
Yeah, I agree. It's a really...
literally the same people.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about the pool, even the small, tiny pool of ex-NBA players, the pool within that pool who have the coaching desire, who want to be coaches, who want to be a part of that. Because I think if you talk to a group of ex-NBA players, I think only a handful of them would say, I want to stay in the league and teach these young guys what I know. And that's a skill in itself. And they're 2 different jobs, I think, distinctly, and those jobs can bleed into each other. But an amazing capologist who does wonders with the team is not equipped to be coach or GM, you know?
And I'm just also kind of thinking, well, basketball is so much bigger than the NBA, you know? And you go around the corner, there's going to be 50 people playing basketball. There's millions of people who watch it, millions of people who play pickup, high school, men's, women's, colleges. And to say that a pool of people who should be NBA coaches comes from this tiny little group, well, who's to say that some excellent D2 coach wouldn't be better than a guy who just retired as a player? Is Steve Nash really going to be a better coach than someone who's spent like 25 years as a D3 coach? I don't know.
And maybe
what are we talking about? Like what kind of meritocracy is this even supposed to be?
And human beings are. This is the dumb thing I'll say. Human beings are complicated, so I think Kevin Durant has a lot of thoughts, and rightfully so, because he is one of the best players who've ever done this. And when he looks at a D2 coach being like, I can't listen to this guy. Like, I'm not going to follow his directions. Steve Nash, on the other hand, I'll listen to him. And that's real, right? Because he's your most valuable asset.
100%. Yeah, exactly. That's kind of all of this is like basketball is such a meritocracy on the court. There's no one on the court who does not deserve to be there. Like, you might have been picked too high, but you get flushed out quickly. Mm-hmm. It is the most dog-eat-dog, brutal survival of the fittest.
Yeah.
Hey, I was drafted 3rd overall. Cool, you have like 2 seasons to figure this out, man. Or you're going to be a laughing stock. Like,
get RJ Barrett out of your mouth, man.
But coaching in front offices don't operate with that same viciousness. It is certainly competitive, and there's backstabbing and palace intrigue and all these things. But it's odd that, like, you can be a bad GM of a team for 6 years. You can't be a bad player for, like, more than 1.
Right. I mean, it's like it's all where our goalposts move to, right? And which players we give different frameworks to. For example, can Anthony Davis and LeBron James coexist? Is there drama there? Do they even like each other? I saw them sitting next to each other, and they were not smiling.
I think you have to pick one. The other one you should trade for Kevin Knox.
Oh, the 16-year-old with sky's potential. I was thinking about this specific thing last night because a lot of the conversation has been about Mark Jackson. It always comes down to Mark Jackson. The same people who are like, Jamal Crawford is a walking bucket. He scored 99 points in his last game. Why isn't he on a team? We found out why he wasn't on a team after the Nets signed him. He's past his prime, and he got hurt, and he couldn't really stay on the court. Like, that's why teams don't sign him. He can still score for sure, but whatever.
But he also can't score at the level that he needs to.
He used to
be valuable in the NBA. And as awesome as Melo was in the playoffs, and I love how he made all the nerds eat their numbers. You know, like a big bowl of Lucky Charms, except it was made of math.
I do love that we don't include ourselves in the nerd pool.
Absolutely not.
I love it. I love it.
I'm a glass slapper for life, baby. Yeah. But Melo, really got those nerds bad by shooting like 37% and being like a huge negative.
I know, when he's like, I found a home in Portland. Portland's like, yee.
That's crazy. How long is that, lease?
Yeah. So back to Mark Jackson. Like, every time this coaching debate comes up and he doesn't get hired, there are certain people on Twitter who are like, how come Mark Jackson isn't given this job? And let's forget about Golden State and what happened there, because that's a whole different conversation about high pick and rolls and not using Curry right and whatever. But if you listen, I was tweeting this, the clues are in the way Mark Jackson calls the game. I really love Mark Jackson games. I enjoy them. I think he's funny. I love hand down, man down. I love mama, there goes that man. Like, these things are joyous to me. But the way he talks about tense situations tells you how he thinks about the game. And he's a deeply religious man, and the Knicks, for example, are a religious organization, and they rest on the idea of hope and adversity and being in the moment and being greatness. I think Mark Jackson in his heart believes in greatness. That is a that is a worldview that I think is awesome, and that works. A GM like Sean Marks might see that and say, that's awesome. I love Mark Jackson. I know Mark Jackson. He's great. But that's not the direction my organization is going in. And I think we never consider that.
I agree. And you hear him say things night in and night out. They're like, he just wanted it more.
Yes.
And he says it without a hint of irony.
I love that stuff. Right.
If you're a modern front office, that may not be reassuring.
If you're Sean Marks.
Talk like that. Right. Yeah. But also, you can't ignore what happened in Golden State. And I don't just mean him, say, misusing Curry, etc. I mean, his front office track record, if we're talking about palace intrigue, was not cool at all. And it's not just some of his more conservative religious views. Like, he was throwing people under the bus. He's a little bit like Jason Kidd in that they're not an inert force. They're not there to just coach. They're big personalities and guys with visions and ambition.
Mm-hmm. They're preachers.
They are not content to just sit there and be a little X and O guy within an organization. Or at least that's not their track record. They want to be involved in stuff.
Yeah. And
which is like more power to them. I would as well, I think. But that's just who these guys are.
Yeah, it's a specific personality type. And, we talk about the not weaponizing of Curry when we talk about Mark Jackson, but we forget that whole team turned on him, and by the time he was done with them, they were not listening. They had tuned him out, is like what we say when teams start not listening or losing faith in their coach. And I remember they mic'd up one of his huddles in the last moment, and he was just like, and I love Mark Jackson so much for this. He was like, whatever happens in the next few minutes, I want you guys to know I love you. You guys are my guys. Whatever happens, we're here. And I thought that was a cool message, but I'm like, win the damn game, man. Where's the play? Like, you're a coach, like save this for later. And I think I'm surprised a team like the Knicks didn't go for him, and they went for the enforcer route with Tibbs. But I
think it does have more to do with his history of sort of meddling and being a larger personality. It's not that people think he's a bad coach, even if I'm not crazy about what he did in Golden State or even his takes, because enough people are believers in exactly the kind of stuff that he said. Mm-hmm. He's not saying outlier type of basketball takes about heart and emotion and wanting it more and stepping up. Like, those are very commonly held philosophies.
Yeah.
Maybe not among progressive NBA front offices, but certainly amongst fans, players, I'm sure some owners, accountability.
Hey, this is my adulthood Sherpa idea. I need someone in my life to be like, be in the moment. You're bigger than this. You can do this. Where's your confidence? But I more need someone to be like, you should respond to that email before 5 p.m. Like, that's what I really need. But I love all that stuff, but it's very understandable why someone like Sean Marks chooses another option.
So let's talk here a little bit about the playoffs that are undergoing. And I'm going to be honest to you, our sweet, sweet listeners.
Our both Patreon and not Patreon listeners.
To everyone, yeah. It's not easy talking about the playoffs because the games happen so rapidly, especially now in the COVID bubble. It's every other day.
Yeah.
So if you listen to this tomorrow, stuff has happened. We can't help this. This is just how it works.
And in a 7-game sample, it swings so hard where 82 games gives you space.
Yeah. So that's why we're not like raring, chomping at the bit to just talk about what happened last night, because by the time you hear it, things could be different. That said,
let's start chomping.
Well, we now have 3 games under our belt in the Milwaukee Bucks and Miami Heat series, all 3 of which have been wins by the Miami Heat. So we got some stuff to talk about in this that is a little bit more relevant maybe than game 1 of Lakers against the Rockets, which we can talk about.
This has been pure Dietrich gruel, man, this series.
that real Rochester trash plate talk. Garbage plate or trash plate. We do them all up there.
Yeah, what is
Refuse
it? What's a
plate.
correct way to say that, man? What is it? A garbage plate or a trash plate?
Nick Tahoe's, I even get it confused because I used to never go to Nick Tahoe's really, and I think that's the garbage plate. And I used to go to a different place that had the trash plate, and then there's all these places that are just called Hots, and they serve the exact same thing, and it's a very regional delicacy.
We gotta text NBA Tattoos, aka Ethan Swan, for this true information.
Yeah, it's Nick Tahoe's home of the garbage plate. But the dish is the same, but they copyrighted it. So everyone has to use a different sort of foul name to describe the exact same dish.
But it didn't work like Kleenex or Band-Aid or Sharpie.
No, it's like garbage plate is what it's known as. But if you get it other places, it's called different names.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah.
Thank you.
So yes, the Dietrich trash plate, garbage plate, refuse plate, gruel box. I feel kind of bad for Giannis to some degree, right?
Oh, wow.
But no, that like, so they're down 0-3. Giannis has been exposed. He's obviously not a great defender.
He
Sorry,
shot
Bo.
six. He went perfect from 3. Oh, he missed all of them, right?
He's 2 of 13 from 3. It's just everything we were saying. Like, stop taking these dumb shots.
Yeah,
and
dunk.
he took 7 in a game where their season was on the line. He took 7 threes. He threw away 7 possessions.
Those are at least 4 or 5 dunks.
Well, I just mean,
Like-
math-wise, he's going to score, I don't know, 8 points out of those 7. And they got 0 because he chucked up stupid threes. That might have been the difference in the game.
Him wanting it more was detrimental to the
Fucking
Bucks.
boomer poisoned, man.
Yeah, that's true.
But so, here's the thing. All season long, we've been talking about the Bucks' dork ball. They're playing with math. And there's 2 ways of beating them. And one of them is being comfortable flinging up a lot of threes. You don't even have to be that great at making them. You just have to be willing to take a ton. And in the last 2 games, Miami has taken 45 and 47 threes. That's exactly the right recipe for beating Milwaukee. Just a high diet of taking threes. The other thing is having some defenders who can kind of stop Giannis. And Miami has done that fantastically. You know, they have Bam Adebayo, who might be bigger and stronger than Giannis, which seems weird, but he kind of housed Giannis a couple times.
I don't know why we talk about Donovan Mitchell in the ways that we don't talk about Bam Adebayo, and he is a legit future star.
Yeah, he's an awesome player. And his ability to slow down Giannis and the Heat's being able to just roll out rugged 6'7" guys, you know, here's more, here's another one, here's another one, here's Butler, here's Iggy. They really do the building the wall in front of Giannis. He gets nothing easy against them. And they're basically saying, all right, we're going to let you guys try to beat us from 3. And Milwaukee hasn't done it. But Miami also deserves credit for they've been closing out hard on those threes too.
Certain ones.
Certain ones, yeah.
Yeah.
All in all, just a masterful game plan. But I also think it's not so much that Coach Bud is getting outcoached.
No.
It's not so much that like Giannis isn't showing up. This was it. This was the way to beat Miami. Excuse me. This is the way to beat Milwaukee. And we knew Miami had this ability. Mm-hmm. We knew Miami was comfortable taking a ton of threes, and they had some really good shooters, and we knew they had the personnel to slow Giannis down. We knew it. These were the things that they had, and that's why they've been good against them all season long. This outcome, to me, is not surprising, other than the fact that maybe I thought Milwaukee would have won game 2, and now it would be a 2-1 series. But it didn't work out that way.
Yeah, there's some coin flippage going on.
Yeah.
It could easily be 1-2, 2-1. But you're right. This was a potential sweep, and the probability of that happening was low. But if it happens, it was on the table. And watching Giannis kind of short circuit is something you've taken great joy in talking about, but it's true. His desire to be great is what makes him amazing. I love that part of him. I think he wants to be the best player of all time. And I don't think every player feels that. I think he does, and I think he has the ability to be that, but not in the way he thinks. I think he thinks in a worldview his game has to be this Jordan-esque, well-rounded thing where he's a threat from everywhere on the court. All he has to be is the best version of himself, which he's not being. The desire to be more is like the struggle, right?
Yeah, 100%. Giannis is a great player. This team that he's facing has personnel that works against him. And they have personnel that works to score against the Bucks. He's like internalizing what was always the case with the Bucks dork ball. Like, look, Milwaukee's entire plan all season has been to let you shoot a bunch of threes, and we're going to shoot a bunch of threes, and we're all going to shoot more or less the same on them, but we're going to get a bunch of points in the paint from Giannis, and you aren't. We're going to get some long twos, on kind of lousy possessions from Middleton, who's really good at those, and you aren't. And we're going to push the pace up to like 118 or whatever they play at, because we want the math. We want a larger sample size, because the more possessions that we play, the better the chance that the math works out in our favor, because we know we're playing with a loaded deck. And that's why they push the ball up the court so fast. It's not because they want to score in transition necessarily. It's because they're trying to generate more possessions a game.
Yeah, and we say Milwaukee's dork ball, but Spo knows what he's doing. It's just different personnel. It looks different, but they're both playing dork ball.
Everyone is to a degree, but the Bucks really, really, really are, because they don't actually have a lot of ways of doing things.
Well,
they just do this thing, and they've done it with incredible success over the last 2 years. And look, if the brackets had worked out differently, I think they would rock the Celtics, because the Celtics don't have an answer for their dork ball. Mm-hmm. But the Miami Heat do.
Yeah. And then I'm not sure the Miami Heat could rock the Celtics.
Exactly. You always say it, it's like fighters, what is it?
Styles make fights.
Yeah, and this is exactly it. Giannis is here wow, I failed everyone. It's like, no, man, you faced the team that had the personnel to beat your team's system. The Bucks don't have a lot of dynamic players who can just play a different way. Okay, we're going to feed Wesley Matthews and he's going to go off the dribble. They don't have that. They are uniquely vulnerable against Miami. And again, this could be a 2-1 series. They easily could have won game 2. They probably could have won either of these other games. But it didn't work out like that. And
this is, I don't think we talk about them losing Brogdon enough, because they had such a great season. But you see them missing him quite a bit in a series like this, like a ball handler, a sharpshooter, who can create by himself but also can facilitate. He was a kind of player that helps every team. I'm a big fan. Him and Van Vliet, I think, are that prototype of player. And when they lost him to the Pacers I believe in free agency, we thought it would hurt them this season. It didn't. They plowed through bad teams. They beat the Knicks a bunch of times. They beat the Wizards a bunch of times, and they ended up with an amazing record. But against the Spo and the Heat, to all the points that you made, I think a chip like Brogdon is sorely missed.
And Bledsoe just does not seem the same at all.
He's hurt. He has to be hurt, right?
I agree. And it's a bummer, because out of all the Bucks, Bledsoe is the one that I'm most sympathetic for, because he's been such a good player and just high quality, both sides of the ball, and has gotten such a bad rap for lousy playoff performances, because he's generally been lousy in the playoffs. Yeah. And I always think that's just a matter of sample size. We thought Lowry was bad in the postseason. Guess what? He just needed to play a few more times, and eventually things evened up. Now he's a fantastic, fabulous, clutch playoff player, a champion. It just took him a little while. He needed more chances. And that's why I feel bad for Bledsoe, because I think he is a really good player who, he's not on Lowry's level, but he's a good player who's kind of just gotten a raw deal. But for him to come back and be shitty again, I'm like, damn, dude. I know he's hurt, but he went 2 of 9 yesterday and had a -22. He stunk.
Yeah, something's not right. I'm a huge fan. I mean, you remember, people don't talk about CP3 as a choker anymore because the expectations of him in LA were different, and then now we talk about him in the right way. He's one of the best. We've kind of forgotten about Harden's failures in the playoffs because he's been good enough. And to your point, to sample size, the Bucks are
I don't
going
know.
to
Harden gets roasted a lot, and even though
still.
it's not fair, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. If he loses to the Lakers, people will roast him again. Like he gets
Oh,
so
for sure
much
that.
heat.
But like he's here every year, man. Me and you were joking. Like the Lakers versus Houston is to me kind of the finals. But this happens every year with the Rockets. I'm like, well, the Warriors and Rockets is kind of my finals. But back to Milwaukee for a second. Eventually, when they lose this series, it's going to change the perception of Giannis and the crown that he's put on himself, and the writers, the BMM, have given him through all those MVP and Defensive Player of the Year awards, are gonna turn really fast in this like in a kind of Russell Westbrook way, where we're gonna celebrate him being like, yo, no one has averaged a triple double since Bob Cousy, since Tiny Archibald.
Oscar.
I know, but just a pick what pre-NBA anybody, since Pete Maravich. So the way we turned on him is the way I think people are going to turn on Giannis, although he's a slammer jammer and people love that.
I mean, Giannis has been doing the same thing he always does. Miami just has a good system to defend him. And I'm with you. He's going to have the wrong takeaway.
Yeah.
It's going to be, I really need to shoot more threes.
Yeah,
my God. I can't believe I went 0 for 7. Time to work on him. Time to keep the defense honest.
In the gym, just chucking up threes, working on his game. You know what it is?
The Bucks need some guys who can take someone off the dribble.
Malcolm Brogdon.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, whoever it is. But you look at it and be like, look, if a team sells out to protect the paint against Giannis, we're going to need someone who can beat someone off the dribble in like the half court. Or we're just going to have to hope we avoid the Miami Heat. And that's why I think Philly defensively presented a real challenge and had that component to beat Milwaukee, but they didn't have the shooting. They were deeply uncomfortable taking 45 shots a game. They would not do it. And you can't beat the Bucks unless you can, but those are the components. And Miami is right there. They got them, Bucks might be able to make this a series. They're a good team, but you can't you can't just overwhelm a team that has your number in those ways. And just to switch to the other first game that we saw of Rockets against the Lakers, which is the finals, it was weird seeing LeBron kind of being outsmarted by another team's personnel and strategy. Even though like LeBron is like obviously maybe the smartest player who's ever lived. He's an absolute basketball genius. But like you just can't battle math. You can't battle strategy. It was kind of fascinating.
I mean, this was Morey's plan, right? He did all of this leading up to LeBron. And I don't think it's talked enough about on the broadcasts. Like Mark Jackson again was saying yesterday in the late fourth quarter that LeBron and Anthony Davis didn't set the tone. They were tentative, and they don't understand the moment. These great players still don't understand
LeBron
the
James
moment.
Doesn't understand the moment. The guy who did the chase down block against the Golden State Warriors and is the greatest player of all time. He's just not stepping up. Yeah. He doesn't get the enormity of this situation. Get out of here.
And I kind of wanted to be in the room with Mark Jackson and just be like, he does get the moment. He is up against a different opponent this time, which is, to your point, math. And he saw it game one, and he's going to regroup. He gave them game one. Like, take my rook, take my pawn, whatever. Some 90s ass chess reference, rap music. I don't know why I did that. But, like, I think he saw what was happening. It was like, I'll see you game 2, 3, 4, 5. But kudos to Morey and Harden. You guys take game one. And the math came out on top for that. It was really fun to watch it kind of click when it kind of hiccuped a little bit last week. But I think LeBron will have an answer. He's the greatest. He's the GOAT.
For sure. I think Vogel is a good coach. I think their personnel is kind of an issue, though, because
yes.
they just don't have guards. Like, Rondo does not look good. Caruso is a guy.
The bald eagle isn't gonna third, the big three.
Danny Green is, a unitasker
And
3
he's
and D
old.
guy.
Yeah.
And he's old, but they just don't have, excuse me, they just don't have dynamic guards. And when the Rockets start going small, you realize what tormented the Sixers all year. If you have a size advantage on everybody, you kind of have a size advantage on no one. Like you're only as good as your best size advantage. You can't use size advantage on 4 different players on one play.
Yeah.
You can't post up 4 dudes.
Yeah. I mean,
But if you're smaller, you can be quicker than everyone on every play.
was it D'Antoni or Morey who said, "It's like all of our guys can touch rim." Just funny. I don't think the probability of the Rockets winning it all is as high as the Lakers, but their point has been proven. I think like Morey is. I mean, we always shower Morey with praise, but he deserves it again and again, and his willingness to put all of his efforts into this point of view is so awesome, and to see it click. I'm like, yeah, he dominated the Lakers in game 1. I'm like, that's incredible. He might lose the next 4. Point taken. This works. It's just a question of coin flips and personnel at this point.
The Rockets, to me, are one of the coolest teams ever assembled, and their dedication to strategy is really entertaining and fun to watch.
Yeah.
Especially because it's not just that he said, we're going to go small, and that's it. He went and got the exact guys, the exact dudes that he wanted that allowed this to work. And it's PJ Tucker, 7-foot wingspan. Robert Covington, I think 7-foot
Love
wingspan.
Cove, yeah.
They have 2 guys who are, 6'7", but play a lot bigger than that.
Yeah.
And they can defend the rim. They can block shots. And, PJ is incredibly strong. And he's a pain in the ass to try to post up, despite the fact that he just isn't that tall. And Morey found those guys who can do that while also spreading the floor. And you can put PJ Tucker in the corner, and he can get out on the break, and he can spot up, and he can go back and he can guard Anthony Davis.
And it's also the big stuff. He signed Eric Gordon to a huge contract that kind of made us all take a moment. And when Gordon is right, like he seems to be now, it fits right in with Morey's point of view, his worldview. And that was a lot of money and a lot of years, but you see his vision, his all-in vision. And
Yeah, like Gordon was definitely a bad contract and has not been that good.
No.
But when he's playing well, you're like, he totally makes sense.
Yes.
He's a chucker who can handle the ball, push the tempo, get into the lane. Like, he totally works in that system.
And what I love about this series is, I think in the offseason, someone like Morey saw the Lakers get AD and LeBron, and Morey was like, in order to beat these 2 elite players, I have to do something unique. And all Pelinka had to do was like keep Josh Hart, keep Mo Wagner. Those 2 guys would change the whole scope of that team. He wasn't able to do that, and he filled it out with a Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. And, he asked Alex Caruso to eat minutes. He said, Kyle Kuzma, step up. And those were all errors, I thought. And that's where Morey saw his opening, being like, the Lakers don't have depth. I am going to go all in and flip my big man, Capella, and his contract for Robert fucking Covington, which was genius, man.
And there is a nice sort of, finger trap element to being small. And it makes other teams... Sorry,
what is happening over here?
Just eating all these pies.
Yeah.
There's something that makes teams want to attack in the post. And it changes the dynamics of their offense. It becomes stagnant. And, that's the problem with going solely through the post. It's predictable. It takes time. You don't know how the defense is going to react. Are they going to play it straight? Are they going to bring a double every time? Are they going to bring a delayed double? Is it going to come from the baseline? Like, you're always struggling to react to what the defense is doing.
And he,
And
yeah.
I just mean like someone like JaVale McGee is on the court. Well, are you going to post up JaVale McGee? Is that going to be your offense now? You're like, well, no. Okay, so you're going to try to post up Anthony Davis over and over and over against a defense that knows you're trying to do it.
And to your point, I don't think Morey had this idea, and then went out and executed it. I think he saw the availability of Robert Covington and decided to do it. Because his personnel, the players you mentioned, including Daniel House, who was hurt, but House, Tucker, and Covington do all those things like close out and contest at the rim, like you talk about. They play bigger than their listed size. Since Morey was allowed to acquire those guys, I think he saw an opening.
And also, this was necessitated by Westbrook. You couldn't have two non-shooters on the court.
Yeah.
But if you can spread the floor and let Westbrook attack off the dribble,
he's the only guy who attacks the rim. It's so fun, and when it doesn't work, it seems like pure chaos, and that's what makes it fun. If it just fires like it's supposed to, not even better than it's supposed to, this thing works. It probably won't, because most teams probably won't win the championship, but this is, I think, the best version of the Rockets in the Harden era we've seen.
I think CP3 is a better player than Westbrook.
Yeah.
And that team could have beat
they had
the
it.
Hamptons
They had
5. It was there.
Yeah.
So like that team might have been better than this one, but this one to me is far more entertaining and weird and cool.
Yeah.
And the way that they have not only gone small, but decided, like, all right, we're going to live with Russ taking a pull-up jumper every now and then because that's Russ. But they basically instructed him, like, just attack. And in some ways, they are doing exactly what the Bucks do with Giannis. Give Russ the ball at the top of the key, spread shooters around, and say, attack the basket. And when you get there,
dish out.
someone's going to be open.
Yep.
And Russ has been awesome, like just absolutely awesome. And
he's had some ups and downs, but
I mean, overall, he's been awesome since they got rid of Capella. And that's I think that's the modern basketball philosophy. There is, it's 100% cool to have one non-shooter, all good. And when Philly fans freak out about Ben Simmons and not being able to shoot, look at Giannis, man. Like, do you want him shooting?
Nope.
You need other guys. You can't just run a team with one guy. I mean, it's like, I don't know.
I'm going to ask you a question I'm curious about. If the Warriors were healthy, and if the Warriors were warrioring, and they were in the playoffs as probably a top 3 seed, does Morey commit to this strategy?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think once you have Westbrook, you couldn't continue with Capella. Just did not work.
Yeah.
You couldn't do it.
Well, I was kind of trying to lead you to Draymond Green's tweet last night, where he said, if there's success, I believe this is how it went. If there's success with the Rockets and they beat LeBron and AD, it's going to be detrimental to the idea of the big man as a trend moving forward. And we're going to start devaluing a traditional center psychologically moving forward, which was kind of like a silent whistle to the greatness of himself. But do you agree with something like that?
I think the big man has been devalued for ages.
But more so, that's what I mean by whistling. Draymond kind of ushered the final straw of the big man. But, Anthony Davis is the most desired chip in free agency.
Yeah, I don't see it having that big of an impact because people should have been searching for guys like PJ Tucker and Covington all along anyway. And that's the same Draymond model. Guys who are undersized who can defend the rim. Mm-hmm. And
you like Julius Randle, like Taj Gibson, like Marcus Morris. I got you. Go on.
Well, I mostly mean if you can find those guys who are rare, yeah, they might be as valuable as a really good big man. But we're just talking about the valuing of different people, right? It's not that Anthony Davis is suddenly worse because you're able to guard him with PJ Tucker, it just makes a PJ Tucker more valuable.
Yeah, AD's value is stable.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't think Joel Embiid gets less valuable because the Rockets are able to beat a larger Laker team. It just means you're like, damn, we should have held on to Robert Covington.
And to Dre's credit, the tweet was like, if your name is not Anthony or Joel, he was talking about tertiary big men in the league.
I mean, we're already seeing that big men, you need at least 4 guys on your team, at least 3.5 to be deep threats. And Brook Lopez, or if you were the Rockets, you couldn't have 2 guys who can't shoot. If you're the Bucks, they don't play Giannis ever with another non-shooter, not 1 minute. They don't do him and Henson like they did in previous seasons. He's not out there with. He literally does not.
Still on that
literally has not played 1 minute on the court with a non-shooter.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, but
big men have been crumbling in value for ages, though.
Although Morey, it was the one to give Capella that huge contract, and he moved him with ease. People wanted him.
I just don't see a title change because of this, because other teams just can't duplicate it. And
I think it's a personnel issue. It's so funny. Like, how many teams are gonna sign their own Lou Dorts? Every team is gonna be like, well, where's our Dort in the G League? I'm like, well, there's one Dort, man. His name is Dort.
But also, like, what's exactly the difference between PJ Tucker and Brook Lopez here?
Brook Lopez is a different market value.
I mean, Tucker is more switchable. I'm mostly saying they actually have the same role. It's like they play as like a defensive big and a stretch shooter.
Yeah, they're similar in ways, for sure. They overlap like a Venn diagram. Yeah,
I just mean role. Like, they're definitely different players.
Yeah.
And I think what we're looking at is that question. Well, is it better to have a legit rim protector, a huge guy in the paint, or is it better to have someone who can give you that same defensive production but also switch on the perimeter? And how do we find those guys? How many Draymonds or PJ Tuckers or Covingtons are there? And the answer is not many.
I'm smelling your 2021 obsession, which is going to be devaluing the skill of rim protection.
I've been pushing that, man.
I know, but it's coming big. I can sense it. It's going to be the new Giannis.
Well, I just think you can find rim protectors anywhere. They're a dime a dozen. And teams are going to keep getting smarter, and that's why I worry about the Bucks dork ball. Because it's a
I just pictured you worrying about the Bucks dork ball.
I'm concerned. I toss and turn at night thinking about the Bucks dork ball and what it's going to do to the league. It's not the Rockets that are going to change the league. Sorry, Draymond. It's the Bucks. Because the Bucks can show you, if you've got a good rim protector, even if he's a slow slug like Lopez, but a good rim protector, and you have someone like Giannis who can kind of just cheat and play sort of zone and leave shooters open and run over and give help defense. Giannis is particularly good at that because of his speed, mobility, arm length, but he doesn't even have good defensive instincts. If you can have those guys and you put some decent defenders around the perimeter, you can have a really good defense. So if you're a shit team like the Hawks, you might be like, all right, well, we got Capella. He'll be our main rim protector. Let's just find a mobile 4, like a Jeremy Grant, and just run the exact same Bucks defense. And it won't be as good as the Bucks, but it won't be, the number 28 defense either. It'll be mediocre, and we're good with that.
I know. And in my mind, when I hear you say that, I'm
45 teams, make teams shoot 45 threes.
But there's personnel is so limited. There's a few Jeremy Grants. There's a few PJ Tuckers. I think it's who you can get. That's why I always come back to personnel. The Morey idea is an amazing concept and thing on paper.
But who else could do it?
Yeah, he got the guys. Covington is the one, right? Okay, I want to do this. Is Robert Covington available? Yes, he is. Okay, I'm doing it.
Hey, Daryl, we want PJ Tucker and Robert Covington because we're thinking of doing the same defense as you.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's why my thing is that teams who are shit on defense will attempt to do it, and it'll have the same impact, but it won't be as effective. Like, they won't be as good as Giannis and Brook at defending shots, but it'll still coerce opponents into taking, 40-some threes a game. And if you have 3 more teams doing that aren't doing it currently, like the Knicks, okay, we're just going to run that same defense. Taj and Mitch. They're just going to stand in the lane, and you're never going to get shots there. And teams just rain threes. And all of a sudden, you do get more of that homogenous style of play that everyone complains about. And it's not duplicating the Rockets' small ball with everybody shooting threes. It's duplicating like that as a defensive solution.
First, they have to get back into the NBA, and then we can talk about defensive schemes, okay? Tibbs is
I just mean, looking at the Knicks, you're like, all right, we have Mitch. He's an incredible rim protector. All right, give us a Jeremy Grant, and we'll just run the Bucks defense, and it'll probably be pretty good.
Yeah, I'm not ready to devalue rim protection, but
I'm not devaluing it either.
Yeah.
I'm more saying that rim protectors are everywhere.
They're
go
gettable.
And get rim protectors. They're a dime a dozen.
But it's like the death of 3-and-D that we always talk about. If you can do a bunch of stuff, like in Mitch Robinson's case, he's one of the most efficient scorers ever, maybe, and he rim protects, like, I'll take it. If you're just a rim protector like JaVale McGee, you can get a JaVale McGee anywhere.
I'm also starting to think in a lot of ways that rim protection has been such a huge part of how the game has shifted that offenses have adapted away from trying to attack the rim in the way that they did a few years ago, I think. I'm trying to think of the best way of phrasing this. It's that there are so many good rim protectors that you have to develop an offense to account for that. And they've started doing that.
For sure.
Which, by nature, then devalues the value of a rim protector.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just evolution.
And then it's cyclic, right? Or it makes an adjustment where people don't value rim protection, and then the game changes again, and then rim protectors like Popovich and the 2-point, the long 2. It's like, well, now rim protectors are so undervalued and moved away from, they become valuable again.
I mean, I think there was a reason that Joel Embiid did not look as good this season as a defensive player, and I don't think it was because he was out of shape or he was sad. I think offenses have adapted. There's a reason that the Nuggets were pretty successful without a rim protector. Jokic can't defend. There's a reason that Gobert, despite being an awesome defender, the Jazz did not have an awesome defense. Like, teams have adapted over the last couple of years. That's always going to happen. You can't just put a rim protector in the middle now and say we're a good defense. It's useful. It's a good start, and you need to have a rim protector for the most part, but it doesn't just guarantee a good defense anymore.
Yeah, I was thinking about...
You can't rim protect a 3, man. Yeah. like teams are taking half their shots from 3. You can't rim protect that.
And that's why I love Mitch Robinson, because of his closeout.
Because he can.
Yeah, he kind of can. And but we were talking about John Thompson last episode, and I forgot to... Well, I was thinking about it since, and I was like, the development of players like Ewing and Alonzo Mourning and Dikembe Mutombo really shaped our league. And the discussion we're having now about rim protection has John Thompson's fingerprints on it, because he introduced, especially with Patrick Ewing, this idea of having like a tower in the middle of your defense that anchors everything, that shuts off access to an efficient shot around the hoop, and then you build around that. And I think as we evolved, we realized there are ways to get past that idea. But that's just a passing thought. I love an amazing big man like those 3 and Mitch Robinson, but it kind of reminded me of the butterfly effect of what happened in Georgetown.
I mean, I just think it shows that there's more than one way to skin a cat. You can have the Bucks gimmick defense, or you can figure out a way to have a solid defense despite having Jokic on the court. Or you can be the Clippers, who do not really have great interior defensive players, but they're so good on the wing and perimeter that it just pressures your team, and they have a great defense as a result. Or you can be the Lakers and just have an elite rim protector, and then you bring in JaVale, and you've got 2 huge guys. I think I think the NBA is in such an interesting place because you can do those things, and then you lose to the Rockets, who are starting to guys who are 6'7" as their biggest players.
I've always wondered what
You'll love to see it, is what I'm saying.
I always wondered what other ways there were to skin a cat. And not to get too gross, I love cats more than anything. I would never skin a cat. But how else would you skin a cat?
Well, there's several ways.
Like, is it an idea? Are you mean to the cat? Do you skin a cat psychologically? Do you skin a cat happily or sadly? You know, like.
Well, I think it's more like, without getting graphic. All right, you've got a cat to skin. Mm-hmm. Where do you start? You know, straight down the middle. You know, dorsal, ventral.
Isn't that all the same way though? I'm thinking, like, can you do it blindfolded? Can you do it with a dog? Can you,
like, with a butter knife?
Yeah, or I've always
a spatula,
garlic press. Can you squeeze the skin off a cat?
I think it's more that, look, the skin's got to come off the cat, but you don't have to do it in one way. You don't have to just like. There's not like, oh, here's how you skin a cat. It's like, man, just do your thing. Like, figure out a way, just get the skin off of this guy.
And it's always the same way, right? Like, you cut it off.
Yeah, well, that's where you're getting to. That's the end goal, is it being skinless. But you don't have to, like, start with a tail.
Is there more ways to, like, take a peel off a grape? They did surgery on a grape, Ben. Did you hear about this?
Did the grape live?
Yeah, it's fine. It's
God.
our leader now. It's going to replace Giannis on the Bucks. It's going to be the next coach of the Knicks. Do you want to be grape or not?
I love cookies.
Greatness isn't all
I
this.
love cookies.
Here's to wanting it more.
I love
The perfect.
Cookies.
Cookies.